Hi guys, I'm Amy.
And I'm Josh, the youth pastor here at Life Anglican Church.
We know that during this time you guys might be having a lot of questions swirling around and not much of a chance to have other people answer them for you. So we thought that we'd give you this opportunity to be asking your questions for Josh to answer. So every Tuesday we're going to be releasing an Ask Youth Pastor Josh onto our Instagram, and we'll have a YouTube channel set up as well. And we want you guys to be sending in your questions to our Instagram messenger. Send in your questions so that we can try and answer them. Today's question is pretty relevant to what's going on at the moment. It's how can you trust that God has a plan and is in control when everything seems to be falling apart?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. To start with, I think to stop and say, how do we actually trust anything at all in the first place? What is trust? How is trust built? How is trust lost? Where does it come from? To recognize that what trust is knowing what's happened in the past and assuming that it will happen in the future. Really, that's what trust is. So when we say that we trust a friend with our secrets, that's because we've told them things in the past and they haven't gone and told other people. And so we assume that that will stay the same in the future. When we don't trust people, it's usually because they've betrayed us or let us down in the past, and so we assume they will do that in the future. So if trust is knowing what's happened in the past and assuming it will happen in the future, how can we trust God and that He has a plan when everything seems like it's falling apart? We need to ask the question, have there been times in the past where it looks like everything was falling apart and it turned out God had a plan all along? Now, if we go to the Bible with that question, have there been times when it looks like everything's falling apart but God had a plan? The answer is a resounding yes. The pages of the Bible are filled with times when exactly that happens. For example, we've got Joseph. We read the story of Joseph in the book of Genesis, the back end of the book of Genesis, and his life, he has some high points where he's like the favorite son, where he's ruling over a household in Egypt, where he's the prime minister of Egypt. But he has some rock bottom points as well, where it surely felt like everything was falling apart. Times when his brothers betrayed him, planned to murder him, threw him in a well to die, and then sold him into slavery. Even having got kind of back on his feet from there, being falsely accused of rape and thrown in jail for that. Times when he just hit rock bottom and he was in jail for years for that crime he didn't commit, watching his friends be executed. And so there were times when surely for Joseph it felt like his life was falling apart. We get to the end of his story, Genesis chapter 50, verse 20, and as Joseph is reunited with his brothers, what he says to them when they're worried about how he's going to respond to them, Joseph says to them, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." Joseph looks back on his story and says, "It looked like it was falling apart, that you as my brothers hated me and everything was only evil. But now looking back, I can see God had a plan the whole time, and it was that people would be saved." And so we see it in Joseph. We see it, I think, even more strongly, and the ideal place to go to find it is in the story of Jesus. Like we imagine being a disciple there at that first Easter, being there on the Thursday night in the garden and seeing Jesus be arrested and seeing Jesus be taken off through false trials, being beaten, being whipped, being spat on, and eventually being executed. Surely for those disciples, it felt like everything was falling apart. They put all of their hope and trust in Jesus for 3 years of their life now, and having put all of that hope in him, they watch him lose and be killed by the religious authorities and by the Romans. And it must have felt like everything was falling apart. But we now, looking back, and even his followers found this out, know that that time when it felt like everything was falling apart was the time that God's greatest plan was coming together and being fulfilled. And that plan led to the salvation of the whole world. And so when we look at history, what we see is that time and time again, it looks like everything's falling apart, but God had a plan. And where we find ourselves now is saying, if that has always been the case in the past, can I trust that it will be the same for this time that I live in? That's what it means to trust God. In a time like this, to trust that He has a plan, even when it seems like things are falling apart, is to look at a history in which He has only ever been faithful, and where it's always turned out that He did have a plan, and to trust that just like in all of those times, the same will be true now. He does have a plan. We don't know it, we might never know it until we see Him in glory, but we trust that He has one and that He is good and loving.
That was awesome. Thanks for that. So you guys, we're praying that this is helpful for you. This is a resource that, is really great for you and encouraging you in your faith. But we really encourage you guys to be sending in your questions so that we can have a chance to answer them. We'll see you guys soon. Bye.